The morning sky over New Delhi shattered into fragments of impossible light. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from her apartment window as geometric shapes materialized above the city, each one the size of a small mountain. They hung there, silent and menacing, defying every law of physics she had spent 20 years studying. Within minutes, similar reports flooded in from Tokyo, London, New York, and São Paulo. The world held its breath. The ships didn't attack immediately. That was the worst part. For 3 days, they simply hovered, watching, scanning, studying humanity like insects under glass. Global communications went haywire. Satellites fell from orbit. Power grids flickered and died in random patterns across continents. Governments scrambled to respond. But how could anyone prepare for something they had only imagined in science fiction? Commander Marcus Webb stood in the Pentagon's Emergency Operations Center, surrounded by screens showing those massive alien vessels. Military analysts had been working around the clock, but their conclusions were grim. The ships used propulsion systems that produced no visible exhaust. Their hulls absorbed radar like black holes swallowed light. Every missile test had been planned, but no one wanted to fire first. Not yet. Not when they had no idea what these visitors could do in retaliation. On the 4th day, the aliens made their move. Not with weapons, but with a message. Every screen on Earth, from smartphones to billboards, from laptops to vehicle displays, showed the same image. A being stood before humanity, tall and angular with skin that shimmered like liquid mercury. Its eyes were too large, too knowing. When it spoke, the words came through in every language simultaneously, perfectly translated by technology humans couldn't begin to understand. Inferior species, the alien said, its voice carrying no emotion, no malice, just cold statement of fact. Your world is now under Dominion control. You have developed faster than expected, but remain primitive. Resistance is pointless. Surrender your weapons, your governments, your autonomy. You will be integrated into the Dominion as a labor class. Compliance brings survival. Defiance brings extinction. You have one rotation of your planet to decide. The transmission ended. The world erupted into chaos. Sarah felt her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. 24 hours. One day to give up everything that made humanity human. She thought of her daughter in college, her elderly parents in California, the billions of people who deserved better than slavery to an alien empire. The academic in her wanted to study these beings, to understand their technology and culture. The mother in her wanted to fight. Marcus received his orders within the hour. Every military force on Earth was mobilizing. But the generals knew the truth. This wasn't a fight they could win through conventional means. The aliens possessed technology centuries, maybe millennia beyond human capability, but that didn't mean humanity would kneel. That had never been their way. In Moscow, General Volkov ordered his nuclear submarines to scatter into deep water. In Beijing, scientists began relocating critical research to underground bunkers carved miles beneath the surface. In Washington, the president addressed the nation with tears streaming down her face, calling for unity, for courage, for the kind of determination that had carried humanity through every previous crisis. We may not have their technology, the president said, her voice breaking but strong, but we have something they clearly don't understand. We have the ability to adapt, to improvise, to fight for our freedom no matter the odds. Our ancestors survived ice ages with stone tools. They crossed oceans on wooden ships. They split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the descendants of survivors, of dreamers, of fighters, and we will not go quietly into the night. Sarah watched the speech with her neighbor, Mrs. Park, an elderly Korean woman who had survived war before. They think we're weak, Mrs. Park said softly. They look at our short lives and divided nations and see fragility. They don't see what holding on to hope despite everything has made us. As the deadline approached, something unexpected happened. Humanity didn't fracture further. Instead, old enemies set aside differences. Resources were shared. Scientists collaborated across borders like never before. It wasn't perfect unity, but it was something the aliens clearly hadn't anticipated. Their species had probably never needed to truly unite because they had always been the strongest. Marcus stood on the deck of an aircraft carrier, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. Beautiful. Earth was so beautiful. Worth fighting for, even if the fight seemed impossible. His tactical team had been analyzing the alien ships, looking for any weakness, any pattern. They had found something interesting. The ships never moved. They held position with absolute precision, which suggested either supreme confidence or a limitation in their ability to maneuver quickly. Around the world, soldiers said goodbye to families. Engineers worked through the night on desperate projects. Ordinary people stockpiled supplies and formed neighborhood defense groups. Perhaps it was futile. Perhaps the aliens would wipe them out in minutes. But humanity had decided. The answer was no. When the deadline passed, the alien ships responded. Smaller craft detached from the massive motherships. Thousands of them, sleek and deadly. They descended toward major cities in perfect formation. Energy weapons charged, visible even from the ground as gathering coronas of blue light. Sarah hugged her daughter through a video call, both of them crying. Marcus gave the order to engage, knowing he was sending people to die. Mrs. Park closed her eyes and prayed to gods old and new. Across Earth, 7 billion hearts beat faster as the first shots of an impossible war lit up the sky. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that superior technology guaranteed victory. They had never fought a species that viewed survival not as a right, but as something to be earned through stubbornness and blood. They had never encountered humanity's greatest strength, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was the only logical outcome. The cosmic fight had begun, and Earth intended to make them regret ever finding this small blue world. The first battle lasted 17 minutes. That was how long it took for the Dominion forces to obliterate 3 full-carrier battle groups, 2 Air Force wings, and countless ground positions across 5 continents. Their energy weapons cut through armor like tissue paper. Their shields absorbed everything humanity threw at them, from bullets to missiles to experimental plasma cannons that had been rushed into service. Marcus watched the tactical displays go dark one by one. Each blank screen representing hundreds of lives ended in flashes of alien fire. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. The preliminary estimates had been optimistic, and reality had just crushed that optimism into dust. But even in defeat, his analysts were gathering data. Every shot fired, every shield impact, every movement pattern was recorded and transmitted to underground servers scattered across the planet. Lieutenant Rachel Kim pulled up the compiled footage at a hidden facility beneath the Australian outback. She had been a video game developer before the invasion, recruited for her ability to spot patterns in complex systems. Now she watched alien fighter craft dance through human defenses frame by frame, her eyes burning from exhaustion and tears she refused to shed. "There," she whispered, backing up the footage. "Right there. Do you see it?" The senior analyst leaned closer. For just a fraction of a second, when an alien fighter banked hard to avoid debris, its shield flickered. Not much, barely noticeable, but it was something. In Switzerland, deep inside a mountain bunker that had once stored gold, Dr. Chen worked with an international team of physicists trying to understand the alien technology. They had fragments recovered from a downed scout ship. Apparently, even the invaders weren't invincible, though the cost of bringing down that single craft had been an entire city block in Mumbai. "The energy signature is all wrong," Sarah said, manipulating the holographic display. A Russian physicist had managed to smuggle out advanced scanning equipment before Moscow fell to occupation forces. "Their shields don't block kinetic energy the way we thought. They redirect it, phase it out somehow. But that requires constant power, massive amounts of power. So if we could overload the system," began Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo University, now relocated here like so many others. "Theory is easy," interrupted Colonel Dmitry Volkov, grandson of the general. He had escaped Russia on a submarine before the Dominion forces locked down his homeland. "Implementation is the challenge. We barely scratch their shields with nuclear weapons. What could possibly overload them?" Sarah bit her lip, thinking. The scientific method required observation, hypothesis, testing. But how could they test anything when the enemy controlled the skies and increasingly controlled the ground? The Dominion had begun rounding up humans in occupied zones, processing them through massive facilities that no one who entered ever left. Rumors suggested biological harvesting, though no one wanted to confirm those reports. In New York, now under alien occupation, former Detective James Rodriguez moved through the rubble-strewn streets. The city that never slept had gone dark and quiet. Dominion patrols marched in geometric precision, their armor reflecting the few remaining lights. James had learned their patterns over the past week. They were efficient but predictable. Military precision was their strength and potentially their weakness. He met with the resistance cell in an old subway tunnel, the kind the city maps didn't show. 30 people huddled around a dying LED lantern, faces gaunt from stress and rationing. They had weapons, whatever they could scavenge, but nothing that could penetrate alien armor. "We can't fight them directly," James said, laying out a hand-drawn map. "But we can slow them down, make them uncomfortable." In Vietnam and Afghanistan, in every guerrilla war throughout history, the smaller force found ways to frustrate the bigger one. We do the same. "They're not human soldiers," someone objected. "They don't get tired, don't get scared." "Maybe not," James acknowledged. "But they rely on systems, infrastructure, patterns, those we can disrupt." Across the globe, similar conversations happened in hidden places. Humanity was learning the oldest lesson of asymmetric warfare. You don't need to be stronger if you can be smarter, faster, more adaptable. Marcus received reports from these resistance cells with mixed feelings. The military strategist in him appreciated their initiative. The commander who had sent thousands to die in open combat felt guilty that civilians were now bearing the burden. But warfare had evolved. The old rules didn't apply when the enemy came from the stars. The Dominion's commander Zixtel stood in the operations center of the flagship, reviewing conquest progress. By their calculations, Earth should have fully capitulated by now. The human military had been crushed. Major population centers were under control, yet resistance persisted in illogical ways. Small groups attacked supply lines. Communications were disrupted. Processing centers suffered mysterious equipment failures. "Increase pacification protocols," Zixtal ordered. The human species was proving more troublesome than anticipated, but they would learn obedience. The Dominion had conquered 47 systems. One more primitive world would not break that record. Sarah's team made a breakthrough on the 8th day. The alien shield technology operated on quantum principles, but it required precise calibration. When Dr. Tanaka accidentally triggered a resonance cascade in their lab equipment, the alien fragment's shield collapsed entirely for 3 seconds before reconstituting. "Harmonic frequencies," Sarah breathed. "If we could generate the right interference pattern." "We don't have generators powerful enough," Colonel Volkov said. "Not portable ones, unless—" He pulled up designs for an old Soviet-era device, something deemed too unstable for practical use. Combined with modern capacitor technology, if they could synchronize multiple units, perhaps they could create a resonance field large enough to affect an alien fighter or ground unit. The implications spread through the global resistance network like wildfire. This wasn't a superweapon. It wouldn't win the war, but it was hope. A genuine tactical advantage developed from human ingenuity and desperation. Lieutenant Kim modeled attack scenarios using the new technology. "We'd need to get close," she reported to Marcus via encrypted quantum channel. "Within 50 meters, and the device takes 12 seconds to charge. That's an eternity in combat." "Then we make those 12 seconds count," Marcus replied. He was planning something audacious, something that would either prove humanity still had fight left or confirm the Dominion's assessment of them as inferior. In occupied Shanghai, a teenager named Lin discovered that the alien patrol routes followed mathematical patterns. She had always been good at math, had dreams of university before the invasion. Now she used those skills to help resistance fighters avoid checkpoints and position ambushes. Her calculations saved lives and struck small blows against the occupation. The Dominion began to notice the coordinated nature of human resistance. It wasn't random. These primitives were communicating, planning, adapting. Zixtal felt something the Dominion rarely experienced: uncertainty. Perhaps Earth would require more resources than initially allocated. Meanwhile, in workshops and garages and hidden laboratories scattered across every continent, humans worked. They cannibalized their own technology, repurposed equipment, shared discoveries through networks the aliens couldn't fully suppress. They were outmatched but unbowed. Sarah looked at the prototype resonance disruptor, crude and cobbled together from parts that were never meant to work in harmony. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Humanity's first real weapon against gods from the stars. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. But for the first time since those ships appeared, she felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. The attack came at dawn. Marcus had chosen Paris for the field test because the city's underground catacombs provided escape routes, and because humanity needed a symbolic victory in one of Earth's cultural hearts. 3 teams, 30 soldiers total, each carrying one of Dr. Chen's resonance disruptors. The devices looked like oversized backpacks connected to rifle-like projectors, all held together with prayer and engineering tape. Sergeant Anna Volkov led Team Alpha. She was the colonel's daughter, and like her grandfather before her, she refused to surrender her homeland to invaders. The early morning fog rolled through Paris streets as her team positioned themselves near the Dominion supply depot. Alien transport vehicles moved with mechanical precision, ferrying captured humans to processing centers. "Ready on my mark," Anna whispered into her comm. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. 12 seconds. That was how long the disruptor needed to charge. 12 seconds standing exposed while an enemy that could vaporize her with a thought had time to react. The target came into view, a Dominion ground transport with 4 escort soldiers. Anna stepped from cover, her team flanking. "Now!" The disruptor whined as it powered up, a sound like reality being torn apart. The alien soldiers turned, weapons rising. 10 seconds. Energy bolts tore through the street, missing Anna by inches. 8 seconds. Her teammate screamed as alien fire found him. 6 seconds. More resistance fighters emerged from buildings, throwing everything they had to buy time. 4 seconds. The whole world narrowed to that countdown. 2 seconds. The disruptor fired. A wave of invisible force rippled outward, and the alien shield simply stopped working. For 3 beautiful seconds, the Dominion soldiers stood vulnerable. Human bullets, previously useless, punched through their armor. The transport's hull, moments ago invincible, crumpled under rocket fire. Then the shields came back online, but it was too late. The aliens were down. The transport was destroyed, and humanity had just won its first real engagement. Anna's radio exploded with reports. Teams Bravo and Charlie had succeeded too. 3 alien units eliminated, minimal human casualties, and more importantly, proof that they could hurt the invaders. "Commander," Zixtal received the reports with something approaching. Alarm, impossible. The humans had developed a countermeasure to Dominion shields? In mere days, the species was proving more adaptable than any previous conquest. Zixtal ordered immediate analysis of the weapon signatures and doubled patrols in all occupied zones, but the damage was done. Not physical damage. 3 destroyed units meant nothing to the Dominion's vast forces. The damage was psychological. Humanity had drawn blood. Word spread through resistance networks faster than light. The invincible aliens could be hurt, could be killed. In underground workshops from Jakarta to Johannesburg, engineers worked to replicate the disruptors. Dr. Chen's team shared schematics freely. No patents, no corporate secrets. Survival didn't care about intellectual property. Within 48 hours, crude versions were being assembled in garages and basements across the globe. The Dominion responded with brutality. Zixtal authorized the destruction of entire city blocks suspected of harboring resistance. The message was clear: defy us and everyone pays. In Seoul, thousands died in retaliation for a single destroyed patrol. In Buenos Aires, occupation forces herded civilians into camps, using them as shields against attack. It would have broken a lesser species. But humans had endured genocide before, had survived tyrants and plagues and their own self-destructive tendencies. They mourned their dead and kept fighting. James Rodriguez's New York cell had grown from 30 to 300. The subway tunnels now housed a miniature city of refugees and fighters. They struck at night, targeting alien communication relays and supply lines. The key was mobility. Never stay in one place long enough for the Dominion to organize a crushing response. "They're adapting to us," James told his lieutenants during a planning session. "Changing patrol routes, reinforcing supply convoys. We need to adapt faster." A young woman named Keisha, formerly a programming student, had been hacking into Dominion communication networks. The alien encryption was impossibly complex, but she had noticed something. When they communicated in occupied territories, there was a millisecond delay. They were routing through satellites humans had thought destroyed. What if those satellites aren't destroyed? Keisha proposed. What if they're being used as relay stations? If we could access them, the implications were staggering. The Dominion's greatest advantage was coordination. If humanity could disrupt their communications, even temporarily, they could even the odds in local engagements. Sarah worked with cybersecurity experts to develop infiltration protocols. The alien systems were sophisticated beyond human technology, but they had a weakness. They weren't designed to defend against attacks from a species they considered primitive. It was like leaving your front door unlocked because you didn't think mice could turn doorknobs. The operation took 3 weeks of planning. Hackers would insert malware into the Dominion network using captured equipment. Simultaneously, resistance cells worldwide would launch coordinated strikes. The goal wasn't to win a single battle, but to prove humanity could fight as a unified force. Marcus coordinated from a bunker in the Rocky Mountains, watching status reports flow in from 6 continents. He had lost weight, aged years in mere weeks. But there was fire in his eyes. This was possible. Actually possible. Launch day arrived. At precisely 1400 hours UTC, Keisha's virus activated. Dominion communications went haywire. Orders got scrambled. Patrol units suddenly found themselves cut off from command. It lasted only 7 minutes before alien technicians purged the system. But 7 minutes was enough. In those 7 minutes, humanity struck everywhere at once. Berlin resistance destroyed a Walker platform. Tokyo cells liberated a processing center, freeing 2,000 captives. Australian forces took out a landing pad, stranding alien reinforcements. Small victories, but they added up. The Dominion had been treating Earth like every other conquest. Overwhelming force applied methodically. But now they had to reconsider. Humanity wasn't following the script. They weren't cowering or accepting their fate. They were evolving mid-conflict, turning the invasion into a quagmire. Young Lin in Shanghai used her mathematical models to predict where the Dominion would reinforce after each attack. Resistance forces used this intelligence to hit supply lines while they were weakest. The teenager who had dreamed of university was now one of the most valuable strategic assets humanity possessed. Dr. Chen's team unveiled their next innovation, a portable scanner that could detect Dominion cloaking fields. The aliens had been infiltrating resistance strongholds using stealth technology. Now that advantage was nullified. The cost was high. The scanners drained power supplies in hours, but they worked. Every human victory came with losses. For every alien killed, dozens of humans died. Cities burned. Families were torn apart. The Dominion's reprisals grew more vicious. But something had changed in humanity's collective psyche. They had tasted hope. And hope was addictive. Anna Volkov stood over the graves of team members who hadn't survived that first disruptor attack. She thought about her grandfather, who had ordered submarines to scatter before Moscow fell. He was still out there somewhere, leading a naval guerrilla campaign from underwater bases. Her father worked himself to exhaustion coordinating global defense. Her mother had died in the first wave of attacks. "We made them bleed," she whispered to the graves. "And we'll make them bleed again." Across Earth, millions shared that sentiment. The cosmic fight had become personal. The aliens had assumed humanity would calculate the odds and surrender. They had forgotten that humans rarely did the logical thing when their home was at stake. They fought. They adapted. They endured. And slowly, impossibly, they were learning to win. The Dominion mothership orbiting above the Pacific was a fortress, home to 15,000 troops and Commander Zixtal himself. It coordinated occupation efforts across Asia and Oceania, making it the linchpin of the entire Western Hemisphere operation. Military analysts had calculated it would take sustained nuclear bombardment to even scratch its shields, and that was before factoring in its defensive systems that could shoot down incoming missiles while they were still in the atmosphere. Marcus stared at the tactical display showing that massive vessel and allowed himself a moment of audacity. What if they didn't attack from the outside? The idea was insane. Lieutenant Kim ran simulations that showed a 98% failure rate. Dr. Chen called it suicide. Colonel Volkov simply laughed and said it was the most Russian plan he had ever heard from an American. But Marcus saw something they didn't, the aliens' fatal flaw. They still underestimated humanity. The plan required coordination across a dozen resistance cells, perfect timing and luck. So much luck. But if it worked, humanity would prove they could strike at the heart of Dominion power. It started with the prisoners. The Dominion processed humans through 3 stages before final harvesting: capture, evaluation, then transport to the motherships. A scientist named Dr. Rafael Santos had survived capture long enough to study the process from inside. He discovered that transport ships didn't scan their cargo. Why would they? Humans had no weapons that could penetrate Dominion hulls. Raphael shared this intelligence through hidden transmitters sewn into clothing. Within days, Resistance leadership began formulating a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. Anna Volkov volunteered immediately. So did 50 others from cells worldwide. They would allow themselves to be captured, carrying miniaturized disruptors that the Dominion scanners couldn't detect because they were powered down, just inert components. Once aboard the mothership, they would activate the devices and disable shields from within, while external forces struck. You understand the odds? Marcus asked Anna privately. She was young, brave, and reminded him of his own daughter who had died defending Washington. I understand we need a miracle, Anna replied, so we'll make one. The operation took 2 weeks to coordinate. Resistance fighters across Asia deliberately exposed themselves, letting Dominion patrols capture them. Raphael's inside knowledge helped them avoid the immediate execution that awaited combatants. They posed as civilians with valuable technical skills. Keisha infiltrated the transport schedules, ensuring all volunteers ended up on the same ship heading to Zixtal's mothership. James prepared external strike teams with every operational disruptor humanity possessed. Dr. Chen manufactured the miniaturized infiltration units, devices so small they could be hidden in false tooth caps and heel inserts. Sarah worked with physicists on a theory that seemed impossible. If they could trigger a resonance cascade inside the mothership, the aliens' own power systems might overload. The math was theoretical, untested, and required reaching the ship's main reactor, something that should be impossible for captured prisoners. Launch day arrived quietly. Anna and her team were processed through a Dominion evaluation center in Beijing. The aliens studied them with clinical detachment, scanning for disease and useful knowledge. Anna forced herself to remain calm as cold instruments probed her mind. They identified her as having military training but catalogued her as low threat. Mistake number 1. The transport ship held 300 humans, most of them terrified civilians who had no idea rescue was coming. Anna's team scattered among them, maintaining cover. The journey to the mothership took 6 hours. During that time, they memorized escape routes, based on Raphael's descriptions, and assembled their disruptors from component pieces hidden across multiple. People Commander Zixtal reviewed the day's reports with growing frustration. Human resistance wasn't diminishing despite overwhelming force. If anything, it was becoming more sophisticated. Perhaps this species required complete annihilation rather than subjugation. The Dominion elders would not be pleased with such failure, but better to eliminate a problem than let it metastasize. The transport docked. Anna felt the shudder as magnetic clamps secured the hull. This was it. The point of no return. She caught the eye of another volunteer, a Brazilian pilot named Carlos. He nodded slightly. They were ready. Dominion guards herded the prisoners into processing corridors. The mothership's interior was massive, a city in space. Thousands of humans were already here, sorted into work details or awaiting final processing. Anna's team moved with the crowd, but their eyes cataloged everything: guard positions, security checkpoints, the subtle hum of power conduits running through walls. Raphael had been right about one thing. The aliens were efficient to the point of complacency. Why guard prisoners carefully when they posed no threat? That arrogance would cost them. At a prearranged signal, a dropped container that looked accidental, Anna's team exploded into action. Disruptors emerged from hiding places. Confused civilians hit the ground as volunteers who had seemed weak and defeated suddenly moved with military precision. The first Dominion guard died before it could trigger an alarm. The second managed to raise its weapon before a disruptor pulse dropped its shields, and human bullets found their mark. Chaos erupted in the processing center. "Go, go, go!" Anna shouted. Half the team moved to secure the corridor, while the other half, including Carlos, ran toward the power core. They had 12 minutes before the Dominion organized a response that would overwhelm them. 12 minutes to disable a starship from the inside. External teams launched their assault. Submarines surfaced across the Pacific, firing every missile they had. Crude rockets launched from resistance bases in Australia and Japan. None would penetrate the shields, but they didn't need to. They just needed to keep the aliens focused outward. Carlos and his team reached a maintenance shaft that Raphael had described. It was a tight fit, designed for small repair drones, not humans. But humans were adaptable. They squeezed through, following power conduit maps that Keisha had stolen from Dominion databases weeks ago. On the bridge, Zixtal watched the external attack with contempt. Primitive projectiles against advanced shields. It was almost sad. Then reports came in. Internal security breach. How impossible. Yet the alarms were real. Anna's team fought through corridor after corridor. They lost people. Jenkins went down protecting the rear. Maya sacrificed herself to destroy a security checkpoint. Each loss tore at Anna's heart, but they pushed forward. The mission mattered more than any individual. Carlos reached the reactor level. The power core was beautiful and terrifying, a contained star pulsing with energy. Dominion engineers worked around it, oblivious to the humans, until disruptor fire collapsed their shields. Sarah's device was small, almost laughably so. Carlos placed it against the reactor casing with shaking hands. The theory said that if triggered properly, it would cause a feedback loop in the alien power system. The theory also said it might just explode and accomplish nothing. Fire in the hole. Carlos whispered and activated the device. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered. Power conduits began to glow too bright. The hum of the ship changed pitch, rising to a scream. The resonance cascade was working. Throughout the mothership, shields failed. External missiles that should have been harmlessly deflected suddenly struck hull plating. Alarms blared. Thousands of Dominion soldiers scrambled as their invincible fortress started tearing itself apart from the inside. Zixtal felt true fear for the first time in centuries. This couldn't be happening. These primitive beings had infiltrated the mothership, sabotaged the reactor, and turned the Dominion's own technology against them. It was impossible, yet it was happening. Abandon ship, Zixtal ordered, dignity forgotten in the face of survival. Anna rallied every prisoner she could find, leading them to escape pods and shuttles. Not all would make it, but those who did would carry the message. Humanity had just destroyed a Dominion mothership. The vessel broke apart over the Pacific, pieces burning as they fell into the ocean. On every screen, on every broadcast, humans watched their enemy's fortress die. Thousands of resistance fighters cheered. Millions more felt hope bloom in their chests like flowers pushing through concrete. The impossible had happened. Humanity had won more than a battle. They had won proof that the Dominion could be defeated, and sometimes belief in victory was more powerful than any weapon. The Dominion Empire had not suffered such humiliation in 3,000 years. Word of the mothership's destruction reached the Dominion elders within hours, and their response was swift and merciless. 5 additional fleets were dispatched to Earth, each one larger than the initial invasion force. The message was clear. Humanity would be made an example of. Species across the galaxy would learn what happened to those who resisted. Commander Zixtal had survived the mothership's destruction, barely, and now stood before the elders via holographic projection. The shame was unbearable. A species they had classified as barely sentient had outmaneuvered Dominion strategy, infiltrated their most secure vessel, and destroyed it with improvised technology. You underestimated them, Elder Krivek stated, its voice like grinding stone. Now we shall not make the same mistake. Earth will be sterilized, every city leveled, every human eliminated. This cannot be allowed to inspire other conquered worlds. But total annihilation took time, and humanity used every second. The mothership's destruction had united the planet like nothing in history. Old borders became meaningless. China shared technology with America. Russia collaborated with Europe. Nations that had been enemies for centuries worked side by side because survival demanded it. Sarah stood before a gathering of Earth's greatest minds, now assembled in a massive bunker beneath the Himalayas. Scientists, engineers, strategists from every nation. The United Earth Coalition, formed not through politics but through necessity. We have approximately 3 weeks before the reinforcement fleets arrive, Sarah explained. Holographic displays showing predicted approach vectors. The Dominion will not hold back this time. They'll use planet killers if necessary. Then we need to become unkillable, said Dr. Tanaka. He had lost his entire family in Tokyo but refused to break. Not just guerrilla tactics anymore. We need to threaten their entire presence in this system. Marcus reviewed military assets. Between recovered equipment and what remained of Earth's forces, they had resources, but nothing conventional could face 5 full Dominion fleets. They needed something new. Something the aliens wouldn't expect. A proposal came from an unexpected source. Lin, the teenage mathematical prodigy from Shanghai, had been analyzing alien fleet movements for months. She noticed something nobody else had, the reinforcement. Fleets traveled in formation patterns that, optimized for speed but created intersecting resonance fields when multiple ships occupied the same spacetime. Coordinates, it's like they're surfing on waves of bent space, Lin explained to bemused admirals. But if you introduce the wrong frequency at the intersection point, the waves collapse, finished Dr. Chen, her eyes widening. The ships would be thrown out of formation, maybe even out of FTL entirely. The theory was sound. Building a device capable of generating such a disruption field was another matter entirely. It would require channeling power equivalent to a small star, a precision timing mechanism that didn't exist in human technology, and deployment within the fleet formation, which meant getting close enough to shake hands with the Dominion commanders. So we do the impossible again, James said simply. His resistance cell had grown into a full military unit, now integrated into the coalition forces. Seems to be our specialty. Work began immediately on what they called Project Wildfire. Every functioning nuclear reactor on Earth was retrofitted to contribute power. Superconductor rings were built from materials salvaged from destroyed cities. The targeting computer required AI processing beyond anything humanity had created before. So they built it anyway, incorporating Dominion technology from captured equipment. Meanwhile, the ground war intensified. The existing Dominion forces, enraged by the mothership loss, launched brutal campaigns. They stopped taking prisoners. Cities that resisted were simply erased. In 24 hours, Mumbai, Cairo, and Mexico City ceased to exist. 10 million dead is a message to anyone still fighting. Anna Volkov walked through the ruins of what had been Prague. Her team had arrived too late to evacuate civilians before the Dominion bombardment. Bodies lay everywhere, human and alien both. The difference was that humans mourned their dead while the Dominion saw casualties as acceptable data points. We're not going to win by being nice, she told Marcus over encrypted comm. They want total war? We give them total war. A new phase of resistance began. If the Dominion wanted to fight dirty, humanity would show them what true desperation looked like. Resistance cells began targeting not just military installations but the aliens themselves. Suicide attacks increased. Captured Dominion soldiers were interrogated for intelligence, sometimes through methods that made Sarah sick to think about. We're becoming monsters, she confessed to Dr. Tanaka one night. We're becoming survivors, he replied. There's a difference. The Dominion would exterminate us without hesitation. At least we still feel guilt about our actions. That's what makes us human. The moral questions haunted everyone. Young Lin, asked to use her mathematical gifts to maximize civilian casualties in Dominion-controlled zones, struggled with the weight. Keisha's hacking skills were requested to crash alien life support systems, killing without seeing faces. James led operations that burned entire districts where collaborators lived. War stripped away the comfortable illusions of civilization. What remained was survival instinct, raw and terrible, yet even in darkness humanity's better nature flickered. Resistance cells that destroyed Dominion installations still evacuated civilians first. Soldiers who killed aliens without mercy still shared their rations with orphaned children. The capacity for both brutality and compassion coexisted in a species fighting for its life. The Dominion reinforcement fleets drew closer. Long-range sensors tracked their approach. Each day brought them nearer, an unstoppable hammer falling toward an anvil that was Earth. Coalition forces worked around the clock on Project Wildfire, knowing that if it failed, nothing else would matter. Commander Zixtal, reassigned to ground operations as punishment, watched humans fight with something approaching respect. They should have been broken weeks ago. Instead, they grew more dangerous. The Dominion had protocols for rebellions. They happened occasionally across the Empire. But this was different. These weren't just rebels seeking better conditions. These were survivors defending their only home. A captured human, a former teacher named Michael, was brought before Zixtal for interrogation. Instead of fear, the human showed only defiance. "You'll lose," Michael said through swollen lips. "Maybe not today, maybe not in this battle, but you'll lose because you don't understand us. You think you're fighting an army. You're fighting a species that has survived extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, plagues, asteroids, our own stupidity. We're really, really good at not dying. Sixtel executed the human, but the words lingered. Could the Dominion actually lose? Impossible. They had the numbers, the technology, the experience of 3 millennia of conquest. Yet doubt crept in like poison. Project Wildfire neared completion. The device was massive, requiring 3 cargo ships welded together to house its components. Getting it into position would require the Dominion fleets to come to them, which meant baiting a trap with something irresistible. Marcus proposed using Earth itself as bait. Let the reinforcement fleets mass for a final assault on the homeworld, then trigger Wildfire at the moment of maximum fleet density. It was risky. If they failed, Earth would be defenseless. But they were already defenseless against 5 fleets. At least this way, they had a chance. The Coalition Council voted unanimously to approve the plan. There were no stirring speeches. Everyone knew the stakes. Billions of lives balanced on experimental technology and desperate timing. But that had been humanity's story from the beginning, surviving against impossible odds through improvisation and sheer stubborn will. As the Dominion fleets entered the solar system, every human on Earth prepared for what might be the last battle. Sarah kissed her daughter's photograph. Anna sharpened her blade. Lynn ran calculations one more time. James checked his weapon. Marcus looked at tactical displays and allowed himself a rare smile. The cosmic fight was about to reach its climax, and for the first time since those alien ships appeared in the sky, humanity believed they might actually survive. The 5 Dominion fleets emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, their combined mass enough to blot out stars. 1,700 warships, each one capable of reducing continents to ash. High Commander Telvok, sent personally by the Elders to oversee humanity's extinction, surveyed the primitive world through sensor displays. This would be the easiest assignment of a long career. On Earth, every military installation, every resistance cell, every civilian with a weapon prepared for the end. Marcus stood in the Coalition Command Center, watching those massive fleets begin their inexorable approach. Project Wildfire sat in orbital position, disguised as debris from the destroyed mothership. One shot, that was all they had. Fleet formation is tightening, Lieutenant Kim reported. Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. They're following the predicted attack pattern. Convergence point will be achieved in 40 minutes. 40 minutes until humanity either won its freedom or ceased to exist. Sarah reviewed the Wildfire calculations for the 1,000th time. Everything depended on Lynn's mathematical models being correct. If the resonance disruption field failed or misfired, they would simply alert the Dominion to their trap. Dr. Chen, Marcus said quietly, you've given us everything. Whatever happens today, know that humanity fought because you made it possible. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Around her, scientists from a dozen nations worked in synchronized harmony. Borders and old hatreds forgotten in the face of extinction. Whatever else this war had done, it had finally unified humanity. Perhaps that alone was worth the cost. The Dominion fleets moved with terrifying precision. Telvok had no intention of repeating Zixtal's mistakes. These ships maintained constant shield coverage, overlapping defensive fields that made them virtually impervious to human weapons. Even if every nuclear weapon on Earth detonated simultaneously, it would barely scratch this armada. But humans weren't planning to fight with nuclear weapons. They were planning to use the Dominion's own physics against them. Anna Volkov led what remained of her team in a ground assault against Dominion positions in London. It was a distraction, pulling alien attention planetside while Wildfire waited in orbit. The fighting was brutal and personal. Every meter gained cost lives. Anna lost count of how many times she cheated death, shields flickering under alien fire, disruptors burning through enemy armor. Hold them as long as possible, Marcus ordered through her comm. We need 35 more minutes. 35 minutes. An eternity in combat. Anna's team dug in, using every trick learned in months of guerrilla warfare. The Dominion forces pressed hard, perhaps sensing desperation in the human attacks. Good. Let them focus here. Let them miss the real threat. James Rodriguez fought his own battle in the ruins of New York. His resistance cell, now a battle-hardened unit, engaged Dominion reinforcements attempting to reach orbit. They couldn't win this fight. Didn't need to, just needed to delay, distract, keep eyes away from space. Your sacrifice will be remembered. A message from Coalition Command arrived. James laughed bitterly. Remembered by whom? If this failed, There would be no one left to remember anything. But that was the point, wasn't it? Fight so others might live. The oldest human story, playing out again beneath an alien sky. In orbit, the wildfire device powered up. 3 nuclear reactors channeling energy into superconductor coils stolen from technology that shouldn't exist. Dr. Tanaka monitored the charge levels, watching numbers climb toward critical thresholds. Too fast and the system would overload. Too slow and they'd miss the convergence window. 15 minutes to optimal positioning, Lynn announced. The teenager had become indispensable, her mathematical genius the foundation of their entire strategy. She wondered if her parents, dead in the first attacks, would be proud. Probably terrified, but proud. Telvok reviewed the tactical situation with satisfaction. Human resistance continued to be fierce, but it was meaningless. In 10 minutes, the fleet would reach synchronization point for planetary bombardment. Then they would methodically erase every city, every bunker, every trace that humanity had ever existed. The galaxy would learn that defiance of the Dominion meant extinction. "Hi, Commander," an analyst reported. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from orbital debris field. It appears to be a reactor system." Telvok brought up the scan. Primitive fusion reactors cobbled together from human and salvaged Dominion technology. Probably a weapons platform. Irrelevant. Nothing Earth possessed could threaten this fleet. "Destroy it when we reach firing range," Telvok ordered, "but maintain formation. I want all ships in position for the bombardment." Marcus heard that intercepted communication and smiled grimly. Perfect. The aliens were so confident that even when they detected wildfire, they didn't consider it a threat. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been being underestimated. 5 minutes, Sarah announced. Her hands shook as she initialized the final sequence. 50 years of physics education, a lifetime devoted to understanding the universe, and it all came down to this moment. Press one button and either save her species or watch them die. The Dominion fleets achieved perfect formation convergence. 1,700 ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, their FTL drives creating intersecting fields of warped space-time. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The pinnacle of Dominion technology and military doctrine. 3 minutes, Lynn said. Resonance fields are aligning exactly as modeled. Anna took a plasma bolt to her armor, the impact throwing her against rubble. She struggled to her feet, vision blurry. Around her, her team was being systematically destroyed. They had held for 32 minutes. Just 3 more. 3 impossible minutes. For Earth, she whispered, firing her disruptor into another alien soldier. James watched Dominion reinforcements overwhelm his position. They were out of ammunition, out of tricks. Keisha had been killed 5 minutes ago, still clutching her hacking equipment. So many gone? But they had bought time. 1 minute, Dr. Tanaka reported. All systems nominal. Wildfire is ready. Marcus looked around the command center at exhausted, terrified, determined faces. Humanity's last gamble rested on technology they barely understood. Wielded by a species the Dominion considered primitive. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was perfectly human. Sarah, he said. Fire, she pressed the button. For a moment nothing happened. Then wildfire activated, channeling enough energy to power a small city into a focused disruption field. The field expanded at the speed of light, washing over the Dominion fleet like an invisible wave. Lynn's calculations had been perfect. The disruption field intersected with the overlapping FTL resonance fields at precisely the right frequency. Instead of smoothly maintaining formation, the fleet's drives began interfering with each other. Ships that had been perfectly synchronized suddenly found their space-time bubbles collapsing, overlapping, tearing at each other. Telvok watched in horror as the flagship systems went haywire. Ships collided despite being miles apart, their warped space-time fields causing impossible impacts. Vessels that should have been inviolate found themselves sheared apart by competing gravitational waves. The perfect formation became a death trap. Scatter, Telvok ordered, but it was too late. The chain reaction propagated through the entire fleet. Ships that tried to engage emergency FTL found themselves torn apart by competing drives. Those that powered down shields to divert energy to engines became vulnerable to debris and weapon fire. On Earth, every sensor, every telescope, every human eye turned skyward, watched the Dominion fleet tear itself apart. Not through human weapons, but through their own technology turned against them. Ships exploded in silent fury. Others spun out of control, colliding with companions. Some vanished entirely. perhaps into other dimensions as their drives catastrophically failed. It was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. The impossible working, humanity's survival snatched from the jaws of extinction by improvised science and desperate courage. The Dominion lost 40% of the fleet in the first minute. Another 30% sustained critical damage. The remaining ships scattered, their perfect formation destroyed, their invasion plans in ruins. Telvuk screamed orders that no one could follow. The carefully orchestrated extinction of humanity had become chaos. Anna felt the pressure on London ease as Dominion forces received evacuation orders. They retreated, shields failing, coordination broken. She fell to her knees, weapon clattering to rubble. They had survived. Somehow, impossibly, they had survived. James watched alien ships flee New York's airspace. Around him, resistance fighters cheered with voices hoarse from screaming battle cries. They had won. A species written off as primitives had defeated an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. Marcus allowed himself to breathe. The Dominion fleet was broken, not destroyed entirely. Enough ships remained to pose a threat. But the invasion force that should have ended humanity had been shattered by human ingenuity. He looked at Sarah, who was crying and laughing simultaneously. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." In space, the wreckage of Dominion ships drifted among the stars, a monument to the price of underestimating humanity. And across the galaxy, other conquered species received the message through Dominion communication networks. Earth, a primitive world, had broken the Dominion Empire recalled all forces from Earth 3 weeks after the fleet disaster. It wasn't surrender. The elders would never admit to such weakness. They called it a strategic reassessment and resource reallocation. But everyone, human and alien alike, knew the truth. Humanity had won, not cleanly, not without cost. The war had killed 2 billion people. Entire cities existed only as radiation-scarred ruins. Families were shattered. Ecosystems were destroyed. Earth would carry the scars for generations. But humanity survived, and survival was its own kind of victory. Sarah stood in the rebuilt Geneva headquarters of the United Earth Coalition, looking out over a city slowly healing. Construction crews worked around the clock, human and alien both. That was one unexpected outcome. Not all Dominion soldiers had chosen to leave. Some, fascinated or horrified by humanity's resistance, had defected. They brought technology, knowledge, and perspective on the galaxy beyond. "Dr. Chen," a voice called. Commander Zixtal approached, its form no longer encased in battle armor but simple diplomatic attire. The alien had been among the first to defect, seeking asylum in exchange for intelligence. "The translation protocols are ready for your review." Sarah nodded, still adjusting to working alongside former enemies. Zixtal had proven invaluable in understanding Dominion psychology and strategy. More importantly, the commander had been genuinely humbled by humanity's victory. The arrogance was gone, replaced by cautious respect. "The other species are asking questions," Zixtal said quietly. "Conquered worlds, vassal states, even neutral powers. They want to know how Earth defeated 5 fleets. The Dominion is trying to suppress the information, but they can't stop it entirely." That was the real victory, Sarah realized. Not the destroyed ships or liberated territories, but the message. Resistance was possible. The Dominion wasn't invincible. Hope could survive in even the darkest circumstances. Marcus had transitioned from military commander to defensive coordinator for the coalition. The war might be over, but Earth needed protection. Humanity had made an enemy of the galaxy's largest empire. Other threats would emerge, drawn by curiosity or ambition, or the simple desire to test themselves against the species that had done the impossible. "We need a fleet," Marcus told the coalition assembly. "Not just defense platforms and orbital weapons. Ships capable of protecting our interests beyond Earth. We can't hide anymore. The galaxy knows we're here." The debate was fierce. Some argued for isolationism, rebuilding behind impenetrable defenses. Others pushed for aggressive expansion, claiming humanity needed to secure resources before others did. Eventually, a compromise emerged, a defense fleet supplemented by exploration vessels. Protect Earth, but also reach outward. Anna Volkov stood at the memorial wall in Prague, now rebuilt and serving as a monument to the war's victims. Millions of names etched in stone and light. She traced her fingers across familiar ones, teammates, friends, civilians she had failed to save. The guilt would never fully fade. but neither would the pride in what they had accomplished together. Young people approached the memorial daily, some barely old enough to remember the invasion. To them, the war was already becoming legend. Stories of impossible victories and heroic sacrifices. Anna worried that glorification would erase the horror, but perhaps that was how humanity coped. Transformed trauma into triumph, pain into pride. Lieutenant Kim had taken charge of the FTL research program. With access to captured Dominion technology and now assistance from defectors, humanity was on the verge of true interstellar travel. Not the crude generation ships they had planned before the invasion, but vessels capable of crossing light years in weeks. First test flight is scheduled for next month, Kim reported to Sarah. We're calling the ship Defiance. Seemed appropriate. James Rodriguez had retired from combat operations. He spent his days training the next generation of coalition soldiers, teaching lessons learned in blood and desperation. The kids called him the Ghost because of his survival against impossible odds. He hated the nickname but understood its purpose. Heroes were needed. Symbols of resistance and survival. One of his students, a teenage girl named Maya, reminded him of Lynn. Brilliant, determined, carrying trauma that would shape her entire life. The invasion had stolen childhoods from millions, but it had also forged them into something new. A generation that had seen the worst the universe could offer and survived. Lynn herself had become a celebrity, uncomfortable with fame but unable to avoid it. The mathematical prodigy whose calculations had destroyed a fleet. Universities offered her scholarships. Governments wanted her expertise. She chose to stay with the Coalition's research division, working on projects that might prevent future invasions. We can't assume the Dominion is done with us, Lynn said during a strategy session. They've never lost like this before. Eventually they'll want revenge, Dr. Tanaka agreed. The Dominion Empire had existed for thousands of years. They would recover, adapt, and potentially return. Humanity needed to be ready. More than that, humanity needed to ensure other species could resist too. The galaxy deserved freedom, not subjugation. A message arrived from the Dominion elders 6 months after the war's end. Not a declaration of renewed hostilities, but a formal recognition of Earth as a sovereign world. The terms were respectful, almost deferential. Humanity would not be interfered with. Trade and diplomatic relations could be established if desired. The implicit message was clear. The Dominion had learned its lesson. Other species began reaching out tentatively. The Galrathi, a bird-like species that had resisted Dominion conquest for decades, requested a meeting. The Vorthan, aquatic beings from the Outer Rim, offered cultural exchange. Even neutral powers like the Collective of Free Traders extended diplomatic feelers. Earth was no longer isolated. Humanity had earned its place in galactic civilization through blood and determination. They weren't the strongest species or the most technologically advanced, but they had proven something crucial, that seemingly insurmountable odds could be overcome through ingenuity, cooperation, and sheer refusal to surrender. Sarah gave a speech at the first interspecies summit held on Earth. Representatives from 47 different civilizations attended, many out of curiosity about the species that had humbled the Dominion. She stood at the podium, aware of billions watching, and spoke simply. We didn't defeat the Dominion because we were superior. We won because we were desperate. Because we had no other choice. Because surrendering meant extinction. And extinction is something humanity has always refused to accept. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages, predators, diseases, asteroids. Our history is an endless series of near extinctions that we somehow survived. That stubbornness, that refusal to quit is our greatest strength. She paused, looking at the assembled delegates. Beings of every shape, size, and biology. The Dominion thought they were conquering just another primitive world. They didn't realize they were attacking a species whose entire existence has been defined by the struggle to survive. Every human carries that legacy. We are the descendants of survivors, and that makes us dangerous to anyone who threatens our home. The speech resonated across the galaxy. Other conquered species began their own resistance movements inspired by Earth's example. The Dominion found itself fighting insurgencies on a dozen worlds. Their empire, built on fear and overwhelming force, began to fracture as subjects realized that freedom was possible. Marcus watched humanity's first true starship launch from Earth orbit, carrying diplomats and scientists to establish relations with allied species. The Defiance was small by galactic standards but represented humanity's emergence as an interstellar civilization. They would make mistakes, face challenges, encounter threats, but they would face them as survivors. Anna trained with coalition forces preparing for off-world deployment. Earth needed defenders, but it also needed representatives who understood what humanity had endured. She volunteered for the first diplomatic security detail, knowing that some species would test humanity's resolve. Let them try. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed to the brink. Years passed. Earth rebuilt. Scars faded, though they never disappeared entirely. Children grew up in a world where aliens were neighbors and trade partners, not invaders. The older generation carried the memories, ensuring that the lessons of the war weren't forgotten. The Dominion Empire slowly declined, its authority challenged by species that no longer believed in its invincibility. Other powers rose to fill the vacuum, creating a more balanced and diverse galactic landscape. Earth remained neutral but vigilant, trading with all, allied with many, dominated by none. Sarah retired from active research to write history. Her account of the invasion became required reading across dozens of worlds. Other species studied humanity's tactics, trying to understand how primitives had achieved the impossible. The answer, Sarah wrote, wasn't in the technology or strategy alone. It was in humanity's fundamental nature. We are not the strongest species, her final chapter concluded. We are not the smartest or most advanced, but we are the most stubborn, the most adaptable, the most willing to sacrifice everything for survival. These traits evolved over millions of years on a harsh world that demanded excellence just to see tomorrow.